vision of the world, but the spreading rot inside her body prevents her from ever being anything more than a ticking time bomb. A foul influence on everything and everyone around her, continuously spreading that new alien biology, even if it is against her will. Despite all of his power, Mikola cannot stop the Scarlet Rot either, and actually abandons the Golden Order when it fails to heal his sister. And I suspect the real reason why no one can cure it is because the Scarlet Rot is not a disease. It is a presence.
Hello, we are just progressing to the DLC with Liurnia Man, taking pictures along the way,
and will never
and we're
let
watching
go.
a variety of lore
whose
videos.
motivations
So
we
check
cannot
the
comprehend, whose power
details
is
there,
beyond
and we
anything
will
we can imagine,
find
whose
our
origins
favorites.
and goals are a total mystery. So let's discuss the true nature of the Scarlet Rot, and to do that we need to look outside of Caelid, because this region is actually not the most rotten location in Elden Ring. It can be found deep underground, underneath the swampy, sinking land known as Liurnia. It is the Lake of Rot, a place where the Scarlet Rot's presence has festered for centuries, if not longer, transforming it into an even more alien and more poisonous environment than the one we see in Caelid. At the heart of this lake, the pests gather among ancient forgotten ruins to worship a relic of an outer god who has been sealed away. I know this because in the central chamber of those ruins, you can find a hidden treasure, the Scorpion's Stinger, whose description reads, "A ceremonial tool used by heretics, crafted from the relic of a sealed outer god." The description for the map of the Lake of Rot mentions this god too. It reads, "It is said that the divine essence of an outer god is sealed away in this land." We actually do have some idea of who was the one who sealed that outer god away, because the description of the blue dancer charm states, "The dancer in blue represents a fairy, who in legend bestowed a flowing sword upon a blind swordsman. Blade in hand, the swordsman sealed away an ancient god, a god that was Rot itself." Here, that outer god is finally given a name. It is simply Rot, the formless presence which is spreading that alien ecosystem to everything it touches. A story is being revealed here. In the distant past, in the time of legend, a god, a being of incredible power and mysterious origins, ravaged the landscape until it was defeated by a heroic blind swordsman. But it could not actually be killed. That god is not a living, organic being in the way we usually think of life. Instead, it is the divine, eternal essence of Rot itself. So long as rot and decay exist anywhere, so will this god. It could only be sealed away, and so there it lay, dormant for countless generations, defeated but perpetual. However, that seal was not perfect. Eventually, some of the Rot God's essence escaped and settled deep inside the body of a newborn demigod, inside the flesh of Melania. No motivation is ever explained. Perhaps, in true Lovecraftian fashion, its motivations are so alien that they are simply inexplicable. We don't know if this was the result of an elaborate plan or random chance. We don't know if it even possesses a mind with which to reason or formulate plans. Perhaps the decay in Melania's body is just a natural consequence of the greater decay of the Golden Order, of an age and a dynasty which has lived for far too long, which has stagnated in the exact same way as the Lake of Rot. Decay is, of course, inevitable, and so the essence of Rot settled in the heart of that dynasty not on purpose, but by some natural process. Whatever the explanation, through her body, the Rot God has been able to ravage the world a second time. And once again, the blind swordsman reappeared to fight it, except this time, because it was nestled deep inside someone's body, he could not simply slay the god. Instead, according to the prosthesis wearer heirloom, he trained Melania in a flowing sword art that would allow her to resist the Rot's advance. In the biblical story of creation, God creates man in his own image. Well, in Elden Ring, the Rot God is remaking the entire world in its own image. This is cosmic horror at its finest. Characters caught in the grips of a power beyond their own imagining, beyond their understanding, something alien and strange and horrific and seemingly unstoppable. However, the Rot God is not the only god influencing events in the lands between. Elden Ring's story follows a very similar structure to that of Bloodborne, From Software's other cosmic horror masterpiece. At the start of that game, and for most of the game actually, it seems as if the story is set in a very typical, very sort of generic Victorian Gothic horror setting, where all of the characters wear fancy hats and monocles and fight duels with werewolves and vampires. But eventually there is a twist. The veil is lifted, and it is revealed that this seemingly ordinary setting has actually been caught in the clutches of several different nightmare cosmic gods. Inhuman creatures who have ascended to a higher plane of existence and who are influencing the world in twisted and blasted ways. In a very similar way, at first, Elden Ring appears to be set in a pretty ordinary medieval fantasy setting. We've got soldiers in chainmail fighting with sword and shield and spell. We've got armored knights on horseback. We've got trolls and thieves and skeletons and dragons and mages. We've got forests and castles and ancient ruins and tombs and caverns to explore. Everything you would expect to find in a standard medieval fantasy setting. The fundamental rules of how the world works seems very ordinary at first too. This setting is being fought over by a pantheon of powerful gods and demigods who are all basically human in both appearance and motivation. Even though their power allows them to do incredible things, they generally behave and think and feel and react the way we would expect a normal person to. It is very similar to the Greek, Roman, and Norse pantheons we are all familiar with. I've already mentioned a few of those gods and demigods like Marika and Melania and Mikola. But throughout the game there are mentions of another god, a god who seems to be even more powerful and more revered than Marika's pantheon, a god who never actually appears in the flesh in-game. Again and again, characters and item descriptions refer to something they call the Greater Will, a vaguely defined supreme being who seems to rule over all creation. But that's not unusual either. Medieval fantasy settings often have some equivalent to a basically Abrahamic-style creator god, a divine being who is all-powerful and all-knowing, who is worshipped in very Christian-looking chapels and cathedrals by very Christian-looking priests and bishops. However, when you reach the end of the game, something very, very strange happens that upends everything we thought we knew about the nature of the Greater Will. Okay, so in the final battle, you confront Radagon, the ultimate champion, who has seemingly seized both Marika's body and her godhood, the most powerful being in the lands between. When you defeat this guy, it should be over. There should be nothing left standing between you and the throne. But then something unexpected happens. This creature emerges from the depths of the Erd Tree. It transforms Radagon's dead corpse into a sword, demonstrating that no matter how powerful we thought Radagon and Marika were, and they were true gods, this creature is so much more powerful than them that their bodies are mere tools which it wields as weapons. This is a display of power on a whole other dimension than anything else we've seen in this game before. This is the Elden Beast, and I want to take a really close look at its visual design. This thing is not only meant to look inhuman, but also to appear unlike any form of life we would be familiar with anywhere on the planet Earth. It seems even more alien than those bizarre life forms we saw back in the rotten swamps of Caelid. The Elden Beast appears to be totally inorganic. If you look closely at its body, you'll see that it does not have flesh. Instead, it seems as if its body is composed of starlight. Except it's also an aquatic creature. Watch the way it swims through the water, the way it glides through this strange, surreal lake that has inexplicably formed in the depths of the Erd Tree. Water, or perhaps deep oceans, are this thing's natural habitat. Besides just wailing away with that sword it pulled out of Ratigan's spine, it also attacks with magic that is both beautiful and incredibly powerful. I mean, just look at these attacks. They are gorgeous. It really looks like the power of a genuine god, full of radiance and splendor and shining light. It is some of the best work the animators over at From Software have ever done. The Elden Remembrance describes the Elden Beast as the vassal beast of the greater will and living incarnation of the concept of order. Okay, so there are two things to discuss here. First of all, the Elden Beast is a servant of the greater will. This reveals that the greater will is not just some generic pseudo-Christian creator god. Instead, it is a cosmic god, born of the stars or of another dimension or of who knows what. And if it's anything like this Elden Beast, its true form must be something genuinely bizarre. The greater will is confirmed to live somewhere beyond our planet. The description of the Elden Star's incantation reads, "It is said that long ago the greater will sent a golden star, bearing a beast into the lands between, which would later become the Elden Ring." The Elden Ring is a relic of truly amazing power, which is made up of runes, including the runes the player character uses to increase their own strength, and the Great Runes, which give the demigods their power. The runes of the Elden Ring also seem to determine the basic rules of reality in the lands between. For example, by excising the Rune of Death from the Elden Ring, Marika purged natural death from her kingdom. In this way, the greater will seized control of the lands between, forcefully and violently twisted this land into a so-called Golden Order. With Marika and her shining armies serving as its champions, it has conquered this kingdom, radically changed the way the laws of nature function here, changed the nature of the divine itself. And I think this process is, in some ways, very similar to the way the rock god transforms the environment in its own image. The greater will is doing basically the same thing, just with different methods. Let's look at that previous description again. The Elden Beast was the living incarnation of the concept of order. Okay, so in the same way that the rock god was actually the divine essence of rot and decay itself, I think the greater will is the divine essence of order itself, somehow given life, given physical form. In the same way that the rot god naturally spreads rot and decay to everything it touches, I think the greater will naturally spreads order and structure to everything it touches. This reveal that the greater will is actually some crazy cosmic god recontextualizes our entire understanding of this game's setting. The lands between are not just an ordinary medieval fantasy kingdom. This is actually a cosmic battleground where multiple starborn gods of unimaginable form and power are competing with each other through different proxies like Melania and Marika, spreading their transformative influence, mutating and changing not only the environment and the life that lives here, but the laws of time and space too, the laws which govern reality. To these supreme beings, humans are, at best, mere pawns to be used in their cosmic schemes. Or at worst, humans are nothing to them. We are just insects to be swatted aside, so that stellar movements beyond our comprehension can reach their zeniths. And it's not just the greater will and the rock god, there's also the blood star, also known as the formless mother, also known as the mother of truth, discovered in the darkness by condemned criminals whose eyes had been gouged by thorns, and worshipped by Moog, the lord of blood, its champion. This god of the fringes appears to be the divine essence of flowing blood, and so she spreads cuts and wounds wherever her presence goes, so that more and more blood will flow. There's the Chaos Flame residing within the sealed tomb deep beneath the capital, resting within the flesh of the heretical Three Fingers. As the name suggests, I believe the Chaos Flame embodies the divine essence of chaos itself, the polar opposite of the Greater Will's order, marking these two as bitter enemies. There is the fell god of ruin, which slumbers within the body of the last giant, who appears to represent either the divine essence of ruin or perhaps of flame. There is the lost god of the ancient dragons, whose influence has long vanished from the earth, who fled this land for unknown reasons many ages ago, perhaps to escape the clutches of an even more terrible god, abandoning his children, the dragons, in the process. There are the mysterious and powerful moons discovered by Rennala and Ranni in their esoteric studies of glintstone sorceries, and because glintstone is formed by the remnants of stars, that's really just a study of the cosmos themselves. The pale light of these magical celestial bodies guides both Rennala and Ranni towards their destinies, but their true nature remains a mystery. There is the immortal serpent god which devoured Rykard, who may represent the essence of greed and who a prophecy claims will one day swallow the entire world in its endless quest for more power. There is Astel, the natural born of the void, a member of a species that falls to the earth in meteorites, and then follows a process of metamorphosis that ends with a stunning transformation into the creature you see on the screen now. Astel's design is actually very similar to the Elden Beasts in some ways. Notice how its body, too, is composed of starlight. Some of their attacks are even similar. There are nearly a dozen different godlike beings whose malign or cosmic or twisting influence has shaped the history of the lands between, and those are just the ones we know about. I probably missed a couple. The world of Elden Ring is a terrifying place to live, where your life is subject to the monstrous whims of any of a dozen different fell gods, each of which are alien and strange and dangerous, each of whom are so powerful that we are little more than insects in their presence. And yet, as strange as it is to say, that's really not as different from our own world as you might first think. The thing about cosmic horror that fascinates me is how true it feels. Of course, we are not living in a universe of cosmic gods of unimaginable power, or at least not as far as we know, but all of us are living in a world where our lives are influenced by tremendous forces which are outside our control and perhaps beyond our individual comprehension. How many of us can claim to truly understand quantum mechanics, or the fundamental forces of the universe, or even what the hell is going on with our global economy? These things determine so much about how we live our lives, and yet we have no control over any of it. At a fundamental level, we do not have control over our lives. That realization can make you feel anxious, a sense of dread, a feeling of powerlessness. Thematically, the purpose of the Nightmare Gods of cosmic horror is to give the audience a medium through which we can safely experience and explore those feelings. And that's part of why I think Elden Ring is a masterpiece of cosmic horror, because it does such a good job of making the player feel small and powerless, like we are trapped in a world that is confusing and incomprehensible. And yet there are also these rays of hope, these ways in which we can defy fate and take control of our destinies back from the fell gods who would underestimate our human potential, who would make the mistake of treating us as mere tools in their own foul schemes. In the end, small though we may be, we are the ones who will decide the destiny of the lands between. Of course, cosmic horror is about a lot more than just scary star monsters. There are a number of other important themes which imbue these types of stories with meaning, and all of those themes can be found in Elden Ring. Some of those themes are 1. Challenged primacy, 2. Forbidden or dangerous knowledge, 3. Deception or the sense that things are not as they seem, and 4. Madness or loss of control over the self. Okay, let's start with that first one, challenged primacy. Alright, so primacy is the idea that humans have primacy in the universe, or in the very least on our own planet. Basically,